Good morning, everyone, and many thanks for joining us in this international event. Today, we are very happy to celebrate the first 15 years of our master program in genetic counseling here at ICBAS, the School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences of the University of Porto. Over these 15 years, we have worked hard to train qualified professionals in an area that is crucial to genetic healthcare in Portugal and worldwide. As many of you know, the path taken has been full of challenges, a lot of challenges, and learning opportunities, and mostly a continuous commitment to quality of the training of the first generations of Portuguese genetic counselors here participating with us. This morning, we open an exhibition of the scientific outputs of our students and lecturers of our master course, unique of its kind in Portugal and one of the few existent at the European level. Now we will start this session with a commemorative video kindly prepared by the Portuguese Association of Genetic Counselors, APAGGEN, and we hope you enjoy this brief historical review. And I would like to really thanks the members of APAGGEN for all their enthusiasm and dedication, also making possible this celebration today. I hope you enjoyed, and it's really meaningful to see the passage of time. And in so many ways, we have been creative and resilient, educating for a profession that does not exist yet in our country. I would like now to introduce the guest speaker for our international seminar, Rebecka Pestoff, who kindly accept our invitation. Rebecka is the program director of the master course in genetic counseling in Sweden. She is a clinical genetic counselor and lecturer at Linköping University. Rebecka's research focuses on improving access and quality of genetic counseling in clinical care, with a particular interest in the integration of e-health solutions. She has contributed to the field through several publications, including her recent doctoral dissertation. Thanks, Rebecka, for joining us today. Let me just share with you and with you all that we have about 200 professionals registered to be here today. The session is being recorded. Perhaps that's why not all are here with us, but we will share the video with proper quality with all the participants as well. And more than 30 countries professionals from more than 30 countries were interested in this seminar today. Thanks, and please share your comments and questions via chat. We will have a moment after the presentation for this discussion. I'm sure this seminar will explain us why it's so urgent to continue training new professionals and integrating them into national healthcare systems. Thanks, Rebecka. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Milena, and everyone here for the kind invitation. It is an honor to be able to be the invited guest speaker for your celebration. And for the kind introduction also, Milena, I don't have to go through all that again. So I can tell you about the name of my presentation, The Evolution of Genetic Counselling Profession, and also Navigating Challenges in a New Era. I'm here to talk to you about the challenges, some of the challenges regarding genetic counseling. But first of all, I want to share the brief history, the evolution of the profession, and also the current state, what is being published and what kind of literature we can find today. There were, of course, some issues and challenges that I would like to raise. And also I have a few personal ideas on how we can address these. And finally, I hope we have a fruitful discussion. So let's save the questions and anything that you would like to discuss till the end, where we have some time set for that. All right, so most of you might be familiar with the evolution of genetic counseling. It started in the 40s in the States, and it was mainly provided, the process of genetic counseling was mainly provided by physicians then. However, in 1969, the first program, master's program in genetic counseling, started at Sarah Lawrence College. And there was a new allied health profession dedicated to this, the genetic counselor. And I think many of us can adhere to that title here today. The core principles of the training programs are pretty much the same as today, about patient autonomy, client-centered care, and informed decision-making. And I find it hard to look up there and talk in the microphone at the same time. Maybe this helps. So I think we can really see that much of this is still in our profession and in the process of genetic counseling, which is quite interesting because this was developed many, many years ago. The competencies through these training programs were achieved through didactic work, clinical field work, and through the research. And we can see that many of the skills regarding communication, critical thinking, genetics, and ethical practice are also pretty much the same today. Of course, developments have happened, but the core is still the core. And I find that quite interesting. I'm giving you the American perspective, the US perspective, because that's where it started. So I'm going to walk you through this timeline where we've discussed the first formal training program for genetic counselors in 1969 in New York State. And then there was the development of the National Society of Genetic Counselors. And this was a really important stepping stone to further the work of introducing genetic counselors into the healthcare profession. As the demand grew for genetic counseling in the 1990s, mostly because of technical advancements, also there was a huge increase in demand for the profession in the 90s. And then in 2000, and the American Board of Genetic Counselors started to accredit the profession. So you needed to fulfill a certain quality level to be able to call yourself and work as a genetic counselor. And these are all important steps that are taken in the evolution of genetic counselors in the US. And then we come to more recent times where telehealth, for example, is a way to expand the reach of genetic counseling and also reach underserved populations. And there has been a lot of research on this from the States. And currently, then there's an ongoing discussion also in the US about the need for new professionals, but also the growing demand and also how to incorporate new technologies such as AI and chatbots. But then now we have a little bit of the historical background, and now I would like to turn our eyes more towards Europe. We had our first master's program in genetic counseling in 1992 at the University of Manchester. So that's about 30 years later. Then we also had the establishment of the European Board of Medical Genetics, which was a very pivotal point in our history in Europe, promoting the standards in the field and also working on harmonizing the profession and the process. At 2014, so only 10 years ago, we had the first certification process commonly for genetic counselors in Europe. And this is also a really important stepping stone to increase quality and ensure patient safety. And further on, we have the same experiences with telehealth and with AI and the increasing need for genetic counseling profession and healthcare. But there are a few words that stood out to me when I was making this presentation and working on this for today. And I'm going to highlight these words that came to mind, summarizing a lot of the work that I read. And it's about harmonization. And it's also about adaptation. So these two are key words for promoting and pushing the counseling profession forward further. And a lot of this has already started and is still happening or is ongoing work. Yes, these two words have stood out to me. And I'm going to fill in a few more words on this list regarding the evolution of genetic counseling throughout the presentation. Also, when we come to the overview of the current state of genetic counseling in the world based on the research that's published. So globally, there is a lot of consensus. We agree on what genetic counseling is. We have, according to the research, agreed on what skills a genetic counselor needs in the world. There's an agreement on the genetic counseling process and the definition of genetic counseling, and that it should really be anchored in emotional support, providing emotional support and showing empathy to our patients. So Ormond did a recent paper collecting activities that genetic counselors do globally. And there's a lot of agreement here. Mostly we are in agreement across the world, even compared to the States then where they have achieved further recognition and acceptance of the profession. So this is very positive. We know what we want to do. We know what we should do, and we agree on this in the world. But there was also a lot of variability identified in this paper. And this is because we're influenced by our local healthcare systems, our cultural factors. We can't ignore these things that affect us. And also because of how the genetic counseling profession has developed regionally where we are practicing. So some interesting challenges were identified in this paper, and it is that we need to, in the further efforts of bringing genetic counseling forward, we need to consider that we are working in different healthcare systems, that there are different cultural norms in different countries, and that we need to respect this to be able to bring the professional development forward together. And so I highlighted again some of these words that I found reoccurring in all the research that I read. So it's again harmonization. We agree on what we're supposed to do and how we do it. Also that we have to adapt to the local and regional requirements, and that these challenges can be addressed further through collaboration and research. Another important paper by Ormond was the one on the global status of genetic counseling today, 5 years since the last consensus was made. So in the past 5 years, there's been a huge increase in the number of genetic counselors. So today, according to this paper, when it was made, there are 10,250 genetic counselors known in the world. I think, just comparing to my country of Sweden, that there are a lot of people working with genetic counseling and also as genetic counselors without actually officially being recognized as such. So this number of 10,250, I think, is a slight understatement. The paper also identified a lot of variability in the regulation of the profession and also when it came to training. So some of the people working as genetic counselors have maybe done a short academic course or maybe been trained in-house in a clinical setting or have done a master's program, as many of you have here. So this describes a heterogeneity that we have in the profession also in Europe compared then to, for example, the States. The paper also identifies some further challenges that we would need more harmonized regulation for the profession in Europe. We need to have professional recognition, and we need to maybe more adapt to the new technologies developing like telehealth or AI, chatbots, and also new genetic analysis, of course. So this together, if we can meet these challenges and take these opportunities, this should lead to improved access of genetic counseling to the people who need it the most. So one of the recommendations from this paper was actually trying to establish an international organization to support the profession's development and to standardize practices globally. So that, I think that was quite a pivotal statement. And again, I highlighted these words that come to mind: harmonization, recognition, adaptation, and collaboration. Of course, I couldn't pass this presentation without mentioning the work by Paneque et al. And this is a really nice summary of what's happened in the genetic counseling education in the past 30 years in Europe. And that's where we are, and that's where my talk is focusing. So of course, I have to highlight the master's program in genetic counseling here in Porto. And it's amazing that you've been successfully producing qualified healthcare professionals for so many years. And you should all be very proud, because this is a real achievement. I'm the program director of the newer program in Linköping, and we haven't been as lucky because the financial states of things makes it hard to have this viable and sustainable for the future. So we will see where that brings us. But as you know, there are about 10 accredited master's programs in genetic counseling in Europe, and they all have achieved the stamp of quality which really the EBMG have promoted for many years. And this is a real achievement and not the easiest of processes to go through for each program. So I'm very proud that ours also, our programs are on this list. But I would like to see more programs in more countries, and also maybe more collaboration regarding this also, because together we can achieve more. I want to summarize a little bit of what I read regarding the global state of genetic counseling. So globally, there's about 8 billion people in the world. And in the world, according to the research, there's 136 training programs that are accredited. So that gives a total of 10,250 genetic counselors, equaling 1.3 genetic counselors per million inhabitants. In the US, then, as a comparison, we have a population of 345 million people. We have 56 accredited training programs and over 6,500 genetic counselors. So that gives the population 18.6 genetic counselors per million inhabitants. And then we come to Europe, where we have together a bigger population than the US, 450 million. We have, as of yet, only 10 accredited master's programs in genetic counseling, and less than 1,000 known. I put in parentheses there because I think there are people working as genetic counselors not included here. But that gives us 2.2 million genetic counselors per million inhabitants. So you see that compared to the States, they have reached further, they have broadened their scope in the profession, and they have a higher accessibility of genetic counseling in the States. So this is something maybe that we can learn from. Maybe we can also see what steps did they take and how can we achieve that here in Europe together. I drew a little graph just for fun, and you see that we have much fewer training programs and many fewer genetic counselors. So I think this is also telling that we need to become more genetic counselors and focus more on genetic counseling. The dotted line there is a historical recommendation of the amount of genetic counselors needed in healthcare, and it is at 10 genetic counselors per million people. So this is something that we can maybe have as an aim forward. Yes, we need to increase the number of genetic counselors and the number of training programs. And much has been done already regarding these efforts. So I think there are some pivotal organizations that have really promoted and highlighted the need and the quality of genetic counseling and counselors. For example, the European Society of Human Genetics has been very important. The EBMG, of course, the Transnational Alliance of Genetic Counselors, and also all the national societies of genetic counselors, like the ICBAS that we saw the movie from here. This is the way that we can bring forward genetic counseling even further. And also, of course, I mentioned the EBMG have really promoted the quality assurance and the training programs, the need for training programs for genetic counselors in all over Europe. And most recently, and maybe most difficult, is to agree on legal recognition as a profession. As Milena said, the profession isn't even existing officially, and it's the same in Sweden. And here I think we can learn and we can work together across countries in Europe to gain legal recognition. I know France has had legal recognition for many years, but also recently Iceland. And this is a huge step that just is made recently. And I think together we can maybe achieve it in an easier way. I know the EBMG are working on it together with other people. And actually in Sweden, we currently have a pending query about legal recognition for the profession at the Ministry of Health. So we are still waiting to hear back from them, but we can all keep our fingers crossed, because each country that achieves this will help the others go forward. And again, I think the pivotal words here are collaboration and harmonization of the profession. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but there are actually some recommendations that were brought out in Europe on genetic counseling. And this was done through the Eurogen test project, which was EU funded for a few years. The funding finished, but the ideal recommendations on genetic counseling are still out there. And if you look at these, even though they're from 2008, they're still very accurate. They're still very, they have these cornerstones, the pillars that genetic counseling that we agree on, that it's built for. And these recommendations can also be used as a basis for harmonization, for training and education, and also to maybe achieve legal recognition. And I'm currently involved in a project in a working group with the Eurogen test under the ESHG, working on to this effect. And I'm reaching out for international collaborations also regarding this. So if anyone is interested in helping bring this forward, please contact me. A lot of work is focused on cancer. I mean, you're all aware of that. And that's a good thing, because cancer can touch everyone's lives sometime. Everyone can relate to cancer in some way or another. And that's why cancer is also very fruitful to work with when it comes to genetic counseling. There is a huge need for genetic counseling, for genetic counselors to provide information and to support these patients who have hereditary cancers. And this paper from the European Commission is a summary of what is going to happen, what their plan is for cancer healthcare in Europe the coming 10 years. And if you read this, I find genetics is very, very frequently mentioned, and also very important to include. And also the communication of complex genetic results. How do we do this in the best way? How do we utilize precision medicine in the best way for the patient? And the information, the genetic counseling is repeatedly mentioned in this paper. More recently, McCrary et al. Summarized or interviewed or surveyed the EU member states and their take on genetic counseling in cancer care. And what this paper says is that, again, there's huge variability when it comes to legislation and practice throughout the European countries, which is surprising when we all agree what genetic counseling is and who needs it, really. So he, in this paper, identified that it varies who, what, and when genetic counseling is provided, and also by different professions, so that we know genetic counselors aren't recognized in all European countries. And this is also mirrored in the paper. What I found really interesting with this paper were the barriers. So each country got to mention barriers they saw in using genetic counselors. And mainly it was workforce capacity. There aren't enough genetic counselors, no, which we've also seen from other papers that I showed you earlier. There's also a shortage of clinical and medical expertise. People don't even know that they can use genetic counseling or can use genetic counselors. And in general, the genetic literacy, both in healthcare among non-genetic professionals, but also among the public, is very low. And this needs to be addressed on a more broad, general level. There were some really interesting recommendations on how we can improve and address these issues. And the first and the most important one was recognition of the profession, genetic counselors, but also integrating genetic counselors in mainstream and specialist healthcare. So this requires that we update legislation and recognition on an EU level regarding genetic counselors, and which we hope then would lead to more equitable, timely, and high quality genetic counseling across the EU. Again, I highlighted some of these words. They come back and back, reoccurring all the time. So again, it's recognition, harmonization, and adaptation. So I've already mentioned some of the issues, but to summarize the points, the challenges we're standing for regarding genetic counseling in Europe, it's the workforce demands. There aren't enough trained professionals. There's a lack of harmonization regarding both legislation and legal recognition. It's hard to provide sustainable training programs throughout Europe individually. And we need to also address the genetic literacy among healthcare professionals and public. And we need to embrace and use new technologies in a responsible way. And I mentioned a few here. Again, AI, chatbots, next generation, whole genome sequencing. So we know these problems. How are we going to address them? And this is, I'm going to not give you all the answers because I hope we can discuss some of this also, but I have some ideas that maybe we together can use and bring forward. So I think it's really important to promote the profession genetic counselors, because when we talk to people in general, when we talk to patients, how many of them actually know what genetic counseling is? It's a very small amount. So one of our jobs as individuals is actually to promote genetic counseling in every way that we can. So I have some personal strategies for promoting genetic counselors and genetic counseling in general. And the little ants at the bottom there, you'll understand in a minute. But these are the 3 points that I think are most important in driving the promotion of genetic counseling forward. It's collaboration, training and education, and research. So on our own, we can't do very, very much. Everyone can do a little bit, but together we can do much more. I jumped over that one, but anyway, I don't know how to go back. You saw the big ant hill. One ant can't do very much, but together we can move mountains. So this is a reach out to everyone here listening that please, let's collaborate even more than we already are. So there are many ways of collaborating. I think collaboration in a multidisciplinary team in our regional clinic or in our clinical setting, in private companies, with patient advocates, with patients, with the general public. There are many ways of collaborating. But the genetic counselors must be an integral part in the healthcare systems and multidisciplinary healthcare teams. And this will hopefully then result in personalized treatments and optimized resource use, a more holistic understanding of the patient needs, and improving patient education and informed decision-making, and make perhaps even more comprehensive risk assessments and provide health management strategies that the patient will adhere to. So basically what this summarizes in is that it saves money and increases patient safety. Incorporating genetic counselors will lead to these results. And this is something, my friends, that the politicians will listen to. So we need to actively also promote our profession towards politicians and explain to them in what way it will benefit them. However, I think it's also important that we as genetic counselors or have a special interest in genetic counseling collaborate. And for example, international collaborations like we are now, sharing resources, research opportunities, sharing best practices, and enhancing perhaps the effectiveness and measuring patient-related outcome measures for genetic counseling. If we all have the same measure for outcomes in genetic counseling, then it's easier to collaborate, it's easier to harmonize. And I mentioned the Genetic Counselling Outcome Scale here by Marion McAllister, because I worked on translating it to Swedish. It's translated to many languages now. And the more languages we have, the more comparisons and the more harmonization we can work on together. So this is maybe a suggestion for someone's future research interest. Further international collaborations are already in place. For example, the Transnational Alliance of Genetic Counselling, which has really promoted this kind of international collaboration. And more recently, also the World Congress on Genetic Counselling, which I hope as many of you as possible can attend, and it's in February next year. So these are ways to increase the collaboration measures. The second point that I want to promote, or that I use as my personal strategy for promoting genetic counseling, is training. So everyone doesn't have to start a master's program in genetic counseling. That's quite high up on the list. There are many ways to improve training and education for others. So maybe your healthcare colleagues, or maybe in another specialist clinic that isn't so involved with genetics, go there, ask them if they would like to hear about genetics, genetic counseling, how to improve patient education. Also, students, of course, take any opportunity that you can to talk about genetic counseling. If you're ever invited to give a talk or a presentation, take it. But if you're ever not invited, please ask them, would you like me to come and talk to you about genetic counseling? This is how we need to expand the horizons. Also, I think engaging with the public is really interesting. And in the UK, they do a lot of public engagement. And I think maybe we can learn from this too, as genetic counselors. How can we involve in public dialogue regarding genetic testing and counseling? And again, I mentioned the politicians because they are the ones who actually make the decisions and who can influence the future of our profession. And these are some of the aspects that maybe you can mention in these scenarios that you are teaching or educating in. The role of patient-centered care, the qualifications and skills of genetic counselors, the added value of genetic counselors. And there's a really good paper on that, isn't there, Milena? But also creating this really collaborative environment. So this is one example of where I'm putting this into practice, the teaching and collaboration, actually, where we are working in the Nordic countries, and there are 5 Nordic countries that are quite similar in many ways: Sweden, Norway, Finland, Iceland, and Denmark. And we have 2 genetic counseling programs actively running. It's in Linköping and one in Bergen. However, we also share, all these countries share a history together. We have similar healthcare systems. We have similar political and legislative systems. We have similar languages to some extent. And we also share training issues, problems regarding keeping our programs viable. So we had this thought that maybe together we can create something, a collaborative effort in promoting genetic counseling and training. Because together we have a much larger population basis than each country does individually. So we created a Nordic network for genetic and genomic counseling with a special interest in education. And actually, based on the Bergen program and the Linköping program, and then adding representatives from Finland, Iceland, and Denmark in 2023, we created this network. And we are currently going to aim to achieve a joint master's program in genetic counseling. And this network was actually funded in 2024 so that we could have meetings and we could spend some time on working on this application to the Nordic Ministry. And our proposal is to have a joint study program for the Nordic countries regarding a master's in genetic counseling. And it's going to be mostly digital and in English. And I think this is a way to enhance the accessibility and equality in providing adequate genetic counseling education. Of course, some of the modules will have to be country specific, where we want to use our own native language in practicing to communicate and to be empathic to our patients. But then instead of having a 10 million population base, like in Sweden, then we'll have a 27 million population base. So hopefully this will improve the possibilities to recruit students and increase the number of genetic counselors in our countries. And the third aspect that I use for promotion of genetic counseling is through health. And Milena mentioned my dissertation regarding e-health and patient-related outcome measures, patient-reported outcome measures. And I think this is one way to really enhance the research arena for genetic counseling in Europe. Some other research regarding new technologies is also use of AI is being tested in Norway, in Bergen. I know that. And sorry, that I mixed them up. That was my master's thesis student who interviewed professionals on their perception of using AI in oncogenetic counseling. And there were varied expectations from professionals on how well this can work. But now at least we have a basis to see, is this reasonable? Is this ethically supportive to use in our clinics? And regarding the chatbots, those are being researched in Norway, in Bergen, how we can conduct or use technology to promote genetic counseling and patient understanding, but perhaps not to exchange the interpersonal relationship and communication between a person and the patient. There's some more upcoming collaborative research that I'm involved in, and it's mostly regarding implementation of genetic counseling in different fields in Sweden. We have mainly cancer genetic and hereditary cardiovascular genetic counseling today. But I'm interested in, and with me, many colleagues, of implementing genetic counseling in psychiatric genetic diseases and also in maternal health care to a broader extent, and also for whole genome sequencing in childhood cancer. In Europe, there are also some collaborative efforts. So for example, we're trying to gather personal professional experiences of what can happen, what negative consequences can we have if there is no genetic counseling. I think all of us have heard of experiences or patients' experiences of not having adequate genetic counseling. What happens then? What are the results and the consequences of that? So we're trying to gather some experiences from professionals regarding this. And also with the Eurogentest project, we are planning to write an opinion piece on the need of genetic counseling in the future in Europe and also how to achieve this. Quite high goals, but we'll see where we reach. I think at least we can start. We can maybe plant a seed in someone's mind regarding genetic counseling. So I'm almost at the end here. Some future directions for genetic counseling in healthcare. And I just wanted to add that some of these pictures are totally AI generated, like this one, for example. It's combining Swedish traditional painting with DNA. I think it's quite cool, maybe not accurate, but anyway. So what we need to do to promote genetic counseling in the future is to train qualified professionals. So we need to increase the number of training programs in the EU in a sustainable and viable way to reach a higher number of qualified genetic counselors. And we need to also increase the competencies in the general healthcare professionals regarding genomic medicine. And I think all of us who work in genetic counseling have a pivotal role in expanding that knowledge to our colleagues. Let's see. There, we need to also work on the legal recognition. And I know lots of work has been put into this already, but we need to not give up. We need to keep trying to gain legal recognition of our profession. And this we can do individual in each country, but even better it would be if we could do it together on an EU level to harmonize the role of genetic counselors and also introduce into mainstream healthcare to basically, again, improve patient safety and save money. We need to also increase our collaborative efforts. There are many collaborative efforts done, but we need to try to work more internationally, to work more locally, and to work more in collaboration with each other when it comes to research and training and harmonization. And also, finally, I want to just put in there, the future is also in the new technology. So we need to embrace this, but in a responsible and ethically defendable way. And that, my friends, was all. Thank you. And let's have a discussion.
Thanks a lot, Rebecka. This insightful presentation and so many relevant messages for this audience and others. Lydia and Inés will help with the remote participants. And now here, Melanie from the 4th cohort of the students and Diogo from the 3rd will help us for questions, comments.
Absolutely. And any questions and comments are welcome. I just put a few of the points from the slides here. If you want to comment on that, feel free, please, because this is not a one-person achievement. We need to really work all together on this.
He says, hi, Rebecka. I am a recent graduate in genetic counseling, and I was wondering how we, as students and beginners in the field, can contribute to the process of recognition and harmonization in our countries. She's asking if you have any recommendations.
Yeah. Again, I'd say collaboration. Find your peers, find your people who are thinking in the same ways to expand the horizons of genetic counselors and collaborate. In my field, there aren't very many genetic counselors in Sweden, so I also have reached out to an international collaboration, and I know both Milena and I are very happy for this kind of opportunities to support each other and to learn from each other and to perhaps do research together. And research in one way expands the knowledge base as well.
But also they can engage in the national societies or associations of professionals of genetic counselors. It's the case of our students, even already starting, they are already engaged, active in our task and process initiatives from the very beginning. So this is another way they can help. And of course, as we ask, and Rebecka mentioned, we all the time ask our students, you need to be the educators of others. You need to be active and very creative in terms of how you approach other healthcare professionals, the population as well. So this is another role you can do all the time, and you will be reaching more and more people.
And just one note, if there is no national professional society for genetic counselors, start one.
I have another question here. Courtney says, thank you for the seminar. In terms of embracing AI chats in genetic counseling, are there any concerns about the lack of empathy and emotional support that technology can provide patients?
Certainly, yes. So that's why I keep saying it needs to be done in a responsible and ethically defendable way. And we need to also maybe draw where are the limits, where is it appropriate and where is it not appropriate.
Questions and comments from this audience? Carolina?
No?
So thank you so much for your wonderful seminar. This is just a comment. Maybe you can expand it. I don't know. I liked very much of what you presented about the joint effort of Denmark, Finland, the joint group, meaning that it is very important to have a global genetic counselors community, of course. But I also think that what you said next, that you have to have specific meetings and efforts locally it's also important. Can you expand more on that? Because I think it's very important to have a global genetic counseling community in Europe, but I think that every country has their specific needs, because it also depends on the laws and on the economic matters and that. Yeah.
I think both of those paths need to be walked on at the same time. So we can work in a global manner together, collaboratively, for common goals and where do we want to reach. But it's also really important to work locally, of course, because there are those differences that you mentioned, the legal, the cultural differences and things, the healthcare setting you're working in, and you need to be adapted to that as well. But hopefully we can find like an overarching goal or setting where we can work together, but also working on the local level. So they're needed. Both of these efforts are needed at the same time.
Because locally, some ideas can arise that when there are meetings globally, they can help other countries that they'd even think about that, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to, you put it very nicely.
Thank you.
Yes, I have another question from Christophe Cordier. I don't know if you know him. He is asking you, as a senior genetic counselor, what are the barriers concerning the recognition of the profession? What do you think are the barriers?
Yeah, there are quite a few barriers, but the recognition, maybe I should ask Christophe instead, because in France they have achieved recognition, so he must know the answer. But I think that we need to promote genetic counseling and also explain the need. And politicians are a very important player here that we need to collaborate with also. So I think going that way, according to legal recognition in each country, is something that we need to do individually. But then we need to also collaborate like with the EBMG, the genetic counseling branch. Together, we can also work for this in Europe. But the more countries that have legal recognition, the more we'll be able to also promote it in their own country and say, well, hey, look, in Iceland, they have it. There's three genetic counselors. They have legal recognition. How come we don't?
Hi. Thanks, Rebecka, for your wonderful presentation in this seminar. You mentioned in one of your slides the importance of research in genetic counseling. So my question is, when you think about the future trends in research in genetic counseling, what is the most important thing or aspect to research in this field in the future? Thank you. It's a hard one, I know.
Yes, that's very hard. I think being able to promote genetic counseling through research is really important. So doing that can be many different ways. Just maybe showing the effectiveness of genetic counseling, having common measures on genetic counseling. How does it positively affect the patients? How does lack of genetic counseling negatively affect the patients? I mean, it's a whole, there's so much to research in genetic counseling that really we can just pick and choose, and any topic will be of interest for promotion of our profession. So, yeah, evidence-based practice, of course. So harmonizing and creating a common basis for genetic counseling in Europe.
Okay, thank you for this wonderful lecture. We talked a lot about communication and making links among genetic counselors all over the world, etc., etc. There is another barrier that is the communication or collaboration between genetic counselors and medical. Another competence of genetics is the disease itself, and the patients belong to different, and usually there is a big separation between the forums where these things are spoken. Is different in the medical specialties and in the genetic counselor meetings. How can they merge?
I can only speak from personal experience. In Sweden, for example, there used to be a meeting for the clinical geneticists. For a very long time, there were no genetic counselors there. But then eventually we kept asking, saying that this is a really important forum for us also. And now we're a natural part of this meeting, collaborative meeting where professions, interdisciplinary or interprofessional meeting with genetic counselors and clinical geneticists and laboratory geneticists as well. So we need to also collaborate in these multidisciplinary teams. So that's really important. We can't do one without the other. But we also have shown that the belief is that genetic counselors and clinical geneticists have different roles, but they're complementary. So this is also important to remember that we're doing different things, but we want to achieve the same goal. So we do this in a very complementary way together.
Well, really. Let me introduce myself. So my name is Claudia. I'm a clinical geneticist. I'm an MD. And I first worked with genetic counselors during my foreign residency program when I was in my 5th year of medical genetics residency in Salt Lake City, University of Utah, where I met Karen Dent. She's a wonderful genetic counselor and a pioneer in terms of education as well. And so I have to tell you, it was absolutely amazing. All these genetics professionals at the same department, and we will discuss the patients before, after. The genetic counselor would have a very close relationship with the family, also with primary care physicians. It was like a beautiful octopus where you have a lot of arms instead of just a few. It was really an incredible experience. So when I came back to Portugal, I also was very interested in having that kind of professionals also working in the clinic where you have medical genetics operating. And so the master's is incredibly important for people to have that degree as well. And we really hope that everything will turn out well soon for us to have genetic counselors in the clinics. But sometimes I feel, from my experience, and I have to thank Nurse Vania Machado, she's here. She's also a genetic counselor coming from the nursing profession. And working with her in Terceira Island is also incredible because she also takes care of everything, like Professor Jorge Queijo was saying before. And she knows all the families, and she has much knowledge, much better knowledge than I have in terms of interface with the population. But what I was trying to say from after this introduction is that sometimes, because this is a postgraduate program, and sometimes many of the students come from a different background where they already have professions related to healthcare, that this transition is also a challenge because sometimes nurses or other professions, for example, psychologists, they already are in their advancing their profession, their career. So all of a sudden to change to another profession where you start in a different point, right? I think that is also a challenge. I think that's also a challenge. So I think maybe within the primary profession, you could also have like a specialization or some kind of recognition, because it's a little bit unfair to ask, for example, if someone is a nurse and they are already very advanced in their career, to embrace, for example, full-time genetic counselor. that it is a new profession. It doesn't have their careers in terms of the steps already established. And so I think that's also a challenge that it's not usually mentioned, but I had to say this because I think it's not fair also for the healthcare professionals. I think we have to find a way also to recognize all their work prior to being a genetic counselor.
Hmm.
And I was wondering, I think that in some countries they decided to do a graduate program, because in that way you will have a purpose, like a finish line, and then you get into the you get into the healthcare system. But if we don't have the profession yet, how can you do that, right?
Mm.
And so that's the point that I wanted to have you discussing. What do you think?
I wish I had the answer to that exactly.
This is an egg chicken question. We have the same dilemma here. For example, German-speaking countries start a master program recruiting professionals from the genetic services. So this was a strategy. They take people from the genetic services, nurses, psychologists, and then they return and have all the background and return and maintain their professional career development. But yes, this is another thing we need. It's an administrative things, but we need to consider as well. But also it has been a challenge for recruiting new students, because it's 2 years full time and no one who is already in the field can stop the contract and then start studying. It's a challenge for in many ways. And thanks for sharing that. And I think it's an issue that we need also to consider here when we achieve that moment. This is like. Any other questions from the, yes, in the chat and in the audience? I hope, yes, we have some others here.
Okay, we have a quick question. Participant asked if you have data about number of genetic counselors which graduate every year from the European Board of Medical Genetics registered programs.
I think maybe Milena knows. Do you?
No, not that's exactly
No.
the number, but it had been, I think, registered and maintaining the registration, sorry, is about 400 now.
Total?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
total.
each year, so over 400 over 10 years. Yeah.
Every the kind of cohort and uptakes is different from each course to the other, because the English courses right now, the scientific training programs are for 3 years. And we know, for example, some others only take students every 2 years.
Yes.
And the number is in continual change. But I think we need, even at the European level, and I don't know who is here with us, but even and I think, I really believe that we need to be very inclusive in terms of just, of course, defend or support standards and requirements, but be inclusive.
Yes.
You were saying this is not the right number because many other professionals are working. I'm sure we have a lot of genetic nurses here in Portugal working with genetic services, doing a great job, but they are not belonging to any professional association or engage with other professionals. And I think really that this is important for educating others and for joining the forces we have.
Yeah, I agree.
How many you have right now?
In Sweden, or trained?
Trained,
I think it's about 15. Soon it will be 15, I hope. But it is according to the program that have taken their exams, and the degree is 10. And I think 2 EBMG certified genetic counselors in Sweden.
Yes, because it implies 2 years
Yeah.
practicing with supervision of a medical geneticist or a senior colleague. So this is complex for countries where there is no professional recognition and access to the practice. So our previous students, not all are working in in this context. I think we have time for one more question here and perhaps in the chat another one. We don't have, okay, because we have a moment at the end, so you can be the last one.
Thank you for your presentation. First of all, I would like to ask if you believe that genetic therapy is something that is being helpful in the improvement of the globalization of genetic counseling, of the genetic counseling community. Like we know that there has been a quite big advance in the research in genetic therapy, and I would like to know your opinion on that, please.
Do you mean, let me rephrase my understanding then. So regarding gene therapy, you were wondering if genetic counselors have a role in promoting that?
Actually,
So the question is then if with gene therapy research, can we also promote genetic counselors and counseling? I think definitely, yes. There would be important for the patient to understand what they're going along with, and for a genetic counselor to explain that would be great.
Well, I think we can close, and thanks to all the remote participants, and now I'm asking Professor Carolina Lemos to come here. You can sit with me or another person.
So this is just a moment to greet our lecturer in name of ICBAS, University of Porto, and of course, in name of all of us from the Master Program of Genetic Counseling. This is just a small offer to thank you again. No, it has some more things inside. This is, no, the bag, yes. Everything, the package, the whole package is for you. But this is just an institutional present, but comes from all of us, okay? Thank you again for your presence. So, just before we finish, do we have the things set? Okay. I would like to call here Professor Jorge Sequeiros to the stage, please. I know you will be mad at me, but sorry. You'll have to come. And also I would like to ask Milena to join Professor there. Yes. Okay, so I was asked, can I? Okay, sorry, don't run away, don't run away, please. Okay, I was just asked, no, I would just ask on behalf of the Portuguese Association of Genetic Counselling Professional to give this small present, okay, to the two main founders of our master program. Of course, since the beginning, several professionals were involved in this master program, and they were always available to participate in this wonderful initiative. But these two were the main nuclear hearts and minds that dedicated a lot of efforts and passion to set this master program in motion. So it is without them, this master program would not exist. So we are truly, truly thankful to both of you for this wonderful initiative that brings us all together here today.